There we are. What's that? Well, L'chaim. L'chaim. Thank you, Matthew, for the beer. We're in
get some enjoyment out of it too.
We'll share the experience. We're in the middle of a time period on the calendar called the Omer, Passover and Omer. And what that is actually comes from this week's Torah portion, that there's a 49-day count from the second day of Passover, so after the first day, until Shavuot. There's 49 days, and the 50th day is Shavuot. So Shavuot has no date actually given in Torah. It's the only holiday that isn't given a date on the calendar. It's the 50th day after Pesach, after Passover. And so we do that count, 49 days, 7 weeks. Now, this count is an intriguing idea. What are we counting? What's the reason for it? How do we count? So it has a lot of different perspectives in the commentaries to try and understand and make sense of this Sephira to Omer. Sephira means counting. Omer was the sacrifice brought on the second day of Passover. So the counting from the Omer means from the day the Omer offering was offered. But essentially, a lot of commentaries agree that this is a preparatory count to Shavuot. And it's a bridge that connects Passover and Shavuot. And we've spoken about this many times, how Passover was just a stage one of freedom. Going out of Egypt is only the beginning. The goal was the Jewish people should get to Sinai, receive the Torah, have the revelation, become a Jewish nation, eventually get to Israel, where they're going to settle the land and develop a society that follows the Word of God. So this is one process. And the counting of the Omer is meant to bridge the process, meant to connect the beginning of it and the end. So Passover and Shavuot are not two separate holidays, but one long continuation. And the counting is meant to be an anticipatory counting. So when you're looking forward to something, a really exciting day is coming up, you have a calendar on the wall, you start checking off days. And so we're so excited to receive the Torah, to get there to Sinai. So the Jews back then were counting the days, and every year we try to recreate that experience. We're so excited for this day that is the anniversary of giving the Torah that we count down the days, or actually count up the days as it is. And each day we say, today is one day of the Omer. Today is 2 days of the Omer. And that's the Omer count. Now, as always, there's something deeper. There's a soul to this mitzvah. There's a depth to what's going on over here that is very relevant to our lives. We're not going to Sinai, we're not on some sort of trek through the desert, but it's an experience that talks to us, that has something to tell to us. And this is the way I like to frame it. We spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, speaking about and thinking about two extreme poles, two sides of an equation. We think a lot about issues that we have, struggles that we have, stresses that we have, how terrible, bad behaviors, bad habits we have, situations in life that are weighing us down, relations that are toxic. We spend a lot of time grappling, struggling with these issues. And then we also spend a lot of time thinking about what a perfect life would look like. There's so much, so many books and articles about how to live your life in the best and the optimal way, and what your life should look like, and how you should be behaving. So we have the bad, that is the current situation, and the good, the goal, where we want to be, where we're supposed to be, where we can be. But not enough emphasis is put on that space in between. How do we get from point A to point B? What steps need to be taken to allow me to develop from the point where I am with my vices, struggles, in my whatever I'm in, to be able to develop in a certain way, progress become better, and eventually be at the place that this second pole is telling me I can be. So I know what I'm lacking. I know my point of struggle. I know where I want to be, but now the question is, how do I get there? And that's the hardest part of the equation and the most uncomfortable part of the equation, which is why no one likes talking about it. You don't make money talking about what to do in the moments, tomorrow, the next day, small steps. What you get attention is people love hearing about their issues. And someone has the same issues as me. So we love talking about that. And people love dreaming of this ideal reality, of this bliss, of this perfect life only, and I can do it. And you have these motivational speakers who are telling you, you can do this. This is, but how? You leave, you ever been to like a talk or read a book and you're inspired by it? I can do this. I'm going to do it. And you already envision yourself being that way. And it lasts maybe a day or two, and then you fall back to your old habits. Because you never had a real path in how to get there. You saw the light. You started running towards it, tracking, but you did another way.
It's like all the runners after the marathon. Everybody takes up running for like a week, and that's it.
Every year after the marathon, I tell myself, next year I'm running that marathon. I got to start training. That doesn't even last a day. That's exactly what it is. So that's the same thing on the calendar. Pesach and Shavuot are symbols of these two ideas. Passover is we leave Egypt. Egypt was spoken many times. The word Mitzrayim in Hebrew, which is Egypt, is the same root as Meitzarim, which means limitations, restrictions. We all have our Egypt that we're stuck in, our vices that we're slaves to, our habits that we just can't get ourselves out of, our insecurities that restrict us, that don't let us grow, that inhibit us. And leaving Egypt is breaking through those barriers, is being able to strip away those layers, is being able to jump out of our skin. We're leaving our Egypt. And that's what we focus on Passover. We act like free people. We're no longer tied down with the shackles of slavery. We're no longer being dictated by voices in our head. We're letting ourselves, our spirits, fly free. We're letting ourselves be ourselves. Incredible. We're jumping away, we're running away from the things that are holding us back. Where are we running to? And so we have this vision of Shavuot. The Jewish people stood at the foot of the mountain and they experienced the revelation of God, the most blissful experience. Suddenly, their whole lives made sense. The world made sense. They're in sync with their Creator. They receive this Torah, tools for living a higher purpose, tools for a higher consciousness. They have this like blueprint for a perfect life. They made it. But the question is, how did the Jews get from Egypt to Sinai? How did they get from being, on a very practical level, they were slaves, right? For hundreds of years, a nation of slaves. They had no freedom. They had no self-exploration, no identity of their own. And within a 7-week period, they suddenly become these spiritually evolved people that are experiencing revelation with God, that are becoming the messengers to the world for good, for hope, for God, for spirituality. That's a radical transformation they went through in a very short period, in less than 2 months. So the time in between was a rigorous training session, was a very intensive workout, spiritual workout that they had to go through to become the people they were called to become. When God tells them, you're going to be for me a nation of priests, a holy nation. And Sefirat to Omer, the time period we're in now, is that process, is that workout. And what I want to discuss tonight is what does that look like? Because I think it's a really important part of our life. It's everything, right? It is life. the two poles, the struggles and stresses of life, and the point where you've made it, that's not life. Once you've made it, you can die, right? You've made it to the top of the mountain, now what? Just live there forever, right? How boring. So life is the struggle. Life is the journey. We tend to live our lives, though, our headspace, our mind, is caught up in those two places of non-existence. In the stresses, in the struggles, you don't exist. They're not you. You're battling demons. You're fighting something else. Once you've made it, you cease being worthy. Life now has no value. There's nothing to work for. You've made it. You're that perfect person. You're just on cruise control. Where are you found? Where's that life? Where is their energy? Where's the spirit of yourself? It's in the journey. What's that journey, and how do we go about it?
Well,
That's
the analogy to the marathon. Like I know when they have the marathons, they have mini meetings all along the way that they're required to do. So it's like they're meeting up, coexisting, and so that you don't wait from 1 month to like when it's happening in September. You're meeting, and I don't know. Maybe do we do that in some way? We're connecting. Continuously connecting to get to the next pole.
very nice. So one idea, one lesson we have from the Omer, not exactly connecting with people, but very similar idea is you have to set realistic goals for yourself. Small steps. Don't just say, in a year I want to be able to run 26.2 miles. Right? You say, next week I want to be able to run half a mile. And you have to have some sort of barometer, right? So having a running partner, having a meetup group is the best way, right? And you say, in a month's time, this is my goal. In 6 months' time, this is my goal. Absolutely. So you have to set for yourself small steps, small goals, consistent, and that way you have something right in front of you here and now. I know my next step. In time management, this is one of the big theories, that you don't do projects, right? Let's say in work or in life, you have projects. Projects are long-term things. So having a project on your head means that I have to get this done in the next 6 months. But what do I do tomorrow? I don't know. I know 6 months the goal has to be reached. That's never going to happen, or it doesn't happen efficiently. The best way to get things done is always have a next step. So in this project, what's the next thing I have to do to make this happen? What's the next thing I can do tomorrow or in a week? What's the next step? Having that set for yourself very small, realistic goals, very defined, and I have to do this now, or it's not going to happen tomorrow. So you pace yourself with very specific, small milestones.
And be open, like Omer's son, I'm sure didn't have the goal of setting up a foundation when he just started running in Warsaw, and be open to Hashem's spin on it.
Let things happen, yes.
Yeah.
You have to... Someone's told me an idea when preparing a class.
I'm sorry, what?
When preparing a class. So if you don't prepare for a class, it's going to fail. But if you say exactly what you prepared, you failed as well. You have to prepare, but sometimes discussion ensues, or things go in some direction to let things go. So yeah, you got to set for yourself very set goals, but don't be too rigid about it. Let things flow in the direction. But that's one of the lessons of the Omer. We're trying to get to Shavuot. Torah says, you know what? Count every day. 1 day, 2 days. I know every day is a step towards getting there. Counting the days is telling myself this day is important. This is important. I have a goal. I'm 1/49th of the way there. I'm 2/49ths of the way there. I'm 3. We don't say the second day of the Omer, the third day of the Omer. We don't say that. We say 2 days into the Omer, 3 days into the Omer. The reason is, not the third day. I'm 3 days into this progression, into this journey. I'm not on the third day. I've done 3 steps. I'm the third day. I'm 3 days in. So that's one very, very practical idea. Setting very realistic, short-term goals for ourselves. That's the way of being able to get ahead, step ahead. Any other ideas?
Well, one is definitely the mind. I mean, be very vigilant with thoughts and focus with the mind. Like one thing I do before I'm going to do an album or a song is I actually visualize in my mind. I'll visualize almost everything. I actually do that. I'll just sit quiet, I'll do a little prayer, and then I'll do visualization where I'll visualize exactly what I'll need, maybe what this song needs or what this song's about, and it's pretty interesting. Sometimes lyrics will come to me in a dream, or a chord, and or by mistake. I'll make a mistake with playing, and then that gets incorporated into the song. So, mentally prepared, where honor the inspiration. I call it like the mother, like the way acorns just fall from a tree, indiscriminate, they just fall. But then I use like the masculine mind, where, all right, I'm going to take this acorn, I'm going to plant it, and I'm going to cultivate it. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to make sure the squirrels don't eat it. Yeah, and work at the inspiration. So that's one of the things I do when I have a goal. Whatever's inspired, work at it, or else it becomes food for squirrels. If you don't plant the acorn, it becomes food for squirrels. So put it in the dark, in that dark soil, which is the silence. I go into the silence.
Okay. That works.
Yeah. It always has results. It grows. To the point of where I can't even say I own it. It just happens. It's like a book in the wind, just turning the pages. Without me turning them. Hashem.
So here's a similar idea. I think it's actually very simple what you're saying, but a bit different track. Let's go back to Egypt, to that story, where we're modeling this after the original story, the Jews leaving Egypt. The Jews run away from Egypt. The expression used, they ran away, they escaped, right? About the prophets prophesies about when Mashiach will come and we'll leave this exile we find ourselves. It says we won't have to run away. So that's in direct contrast to the expression used in Egypt. And what that means is like this. The Jews couldn't just leave Egypt. I'm not talking about geographically. I'm talking about spiritually, mentally, emotionally. They were in such a dark place. They were in such a bad position that they had to escape reality. The reality they were engaged in, they were really overcome with. They couldn't work their way out of it. There wasn't solutions. There wasn't a way they could somehow find themselves. They had to just run away from it, escape it. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do often to our issues. If we have a problem, if we have a real issue, we practice escapism. We want to just pretend it doesn't exist, ignore it, run away from it. Sometimes it actually means physically running away from somewhere. People run away from relationships that are just killing them or really holding them back. And you just run. Kids who feel, whether rightly or wrongly, their parents are suppressing them, run away from home. They can't just deal with the issue. They can't tell the parents, it makes sense immediately, it's not going to work. They're so diametrically opposed to the parents, the situation. The only way they can, in their experience, their expression, their own feeling at least, the only way they can work right now is they escape the issue. Leave it behind. If I'm in the issue, if I'm in the place where the physical space or conceptual space of the issue, I'm going to drown. I can't handle it. And so you have to escape. And the Jews in Egypt were too far sunk. They couldn't work their way out of Egypt. They had to run away. And it sounds like a cop-out, right? It sounds like, you're not dealing with your problems. You're just ignoring them. You're just escaping them. But it's often a necessary first step. Because If you try and engage in your problem, it only brings you down further, right? It can be a toxic relationship. If you try working it, it just gets you even more depressed. You lose your self-worth even more, right? It just pulls you in even further. It could be a vice that you have. Some people are addictions. And when you try confronting the addiction, if you're in it, often it can just drag you even further. You have withdrawal, which will pull you back further, or engaging in it itself. You're thinking about it. Just thinking about it will have you programmed to want it more. And so if you're in a really bad place, and we all have this in a subtle way, right? Hopefully we're not addicts or we're not in toxic relationships. But to a degree, we have things that we're not good at. We have things that hold us back. We have insecurities. And sometimes the only solution in the moment is to run away from them. Ignore them. Literally block them out. Pretend they don't exist. Create a safe space in our mind that this insecurity can't get in. I'm ignoring that thought. Don't let your mind go there. It's a cop-out. It's a necessary cop-out. You're escaping reality. That can also exist in a, not necessarily a negative sense, or run away from bad, but on a spiritual experience. Often if you want to experience something spiritual, we have to escape our material, regular, day-to-day reality. Right? We're not ready to embrace spirituality within our lives. If we try to, we'll fail. We're so engaged in our material world. We're so engaged in the here and now of mundane living that the only way for us to experience something spiritual, something quote-unquote holy, sacred, is if we escape it. And so it may be going to synagogue for prayers. If you think about it, going to synagogue is escaping routine. I'm not at home, I'm not at work, I'm not with my friends, I'm escaping life. My phone is off, hopefully. I'm escaping reality in order to have an experience that is spiritual. Even within the synagogue, some people need to enter a meditative state. Once again, I am removing distractions. I'm literally escaping myself. You don't trust yourself. And rightly so. We shouldn't trust ourselves, most of us. What you're saying is, me, I'm too bogged down by work, by stress, by family, by responsibilities, by my appointments tomorrow. And if I just be my regular self, I will never be able to have a clear mind. I won't be able to communicate with God. I won't be able to have a spiritual experience. So I have to escape all of that through whatever means it takes. Geographic location, meditative preparation for prayer. But those are all escapes. The same idea, people like get inspired. Inspiration, what inspiration really means is that I'm leaving my regular frame of mind, because that's a Egypt, that holds me back, and I'm transcending that momentarily in an inspired position right now. I'm in an inspired mindset, and then I have this communication with God. Then I have this experience. You're leaving your Egypt in order to experience something. Mm-hmm. Not a negative thing, very healthy, necessary, but we have to realize its shortcomings.
Have to what?
Realize its shortcomings. Where this falls short is that in order to have that, you have to escape yourself. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's a problem, there's many reasons. I'll give you a couple of reasons. The main reason the problem is that it's always going to be short-lived. You can only escape for a certain amount of time, right? You want to escape reality, you can dive underwater. Eventually you got to pop up out for fresh air. You can't stay in the synagogue all day, you got to make a living, right? You can't be inspired forever. Eventually reality hits. So you can make a daily routine of escaping, and we should. 5 minutes a day, half hour a day of escaping. Silent prayer, quiet time for yourself, meditation, study, whatever it's going to be. We should make daily routines for escaping.
It's like inspiration and aspiration.
Absolutely.
You know, you breathe in inspiration, and then you have to aspire.
You have to aspire.
And if you don't aspire to what's inspired, like I said, it just eviscerates.
So inspiration is short-lived. You fall back down. And if you're not prepared for it, you fall down with a crash, right? And that's exactly it. Inspiration, you breathe in, eventually you got to breathe that out. So breathing in, you're full of air, it's exciting, you feel light. But eventually you got to breathe out. And if that breathing out has to take you somewhere. And so inspiration is short-lived. It's going to have concrete results. The second problem with inspiration, with this escape, is that it's not you. You're robbing yourself of yourself. You're basically saying, not in these words obviously, that in order for me to live my best self, my heightened state of consciousness, my inspired self, I can't be myself. Me, it's not good for this world. I'm not good for this life. I'm not made for it. The only way I can live a good life, only way I can be in touch with this higher living, is if I escape myself. If I'm not myself anymore. That's terrible. Right? We are born to be ourselves. God created you to be you. And not only are you robbing yourself of yourself, you're robbing the world of yourself. You have so much to give the world. And if you escape, your talents, your gifts you have to contribute to the world, the relationships you have, real relationships in our real world, in the here and now. You can't be present in those relationships. And so you're really living life in a shadow of yourself. And that can't be the full experience of the reality of our world. That can't be the ultimate expression of our religious expression or of any sort of spiritual expression, because it's only a shadow of who you are. And so the challenge is to maintain, or not only maintain, to integrate whatever experience you're having in your inspired state into who you really are. So the second stage, after you have to escape the beast, is confronting the beast. That's where the real challenge lies. You can't do it when you're in it. Once you're stuck, when you're in a problem, you can't confront the problem. You are the problem. Confronting it is just putting yourself in this circular position, because you are it. Once you escape it, and you have a few moments of breath, you have some sort of long-sighted vision, some sort of, you see the light into the tunnel, then you can backtrack and try confront the issue. Because you can't escape it forever. You can't keep running away. It's going to catch up with you. Eventually you got to confront it. And the only way of eventually being wholesome within your regular self is once you've confronted your issues and dealt with them. Because then, if you've dealt with your issues, then you, the real you in your regular life, is beyond those issues. You've dealt with them. So you don't have to escape them anymore to be a good person. You have become a good person in the here and now. And so back to the Jewish people again in Egypt. They escaped Egypt. They ran away from evil. They had to, because they were so stuck in evil. As an Egyptian mindset, they had to say, to heck with it. And they jumped off that cliff. We're jumping out of Egypt. Now they left Egypt, and Pharaoh no longer has any hold on them. And then they have to go back and look inside their souls and say, there's a lot of Pharaoh in here, a lot of Egypt inside me. Let me confront the Egypt. I'm in a healthier position now. I escaped the Egypt. Now I can say, let's look at what and how, where and when I can deal with it. That's the Omer period. That's the only way they can have a sustainable relationship with God when Shavuot came. Only way they can actually be people that are able to bring light to the world in a sustainable fashion, instead of a moment of inspiration. Now, how do they deal with the animal? And here's the key things we learn from the Omer. Number one is break it down. When we have a problem, often the biggest challenge is that we're overwhelmed by the enormity of the issue. We see no way out because we just see a big issue. Instead of breaking it down into very tangible, this big issue, what it really means is this has to be dealt with, that has to be dealt with, and the other thing. And if all those are dealt with, the issue can be taken care of. But when we're emotionally involved with it, we don't see it that way. We have to step back, then we can break it down and tackle one thing at a time. The Omer, the 49 days of the Omer, in the Kabbalah, each day is given another character. So, the Kabbalah speaks of the soul having 7 sefirot, 7 character traits, 7 emotions. And each of those 7 is integrated with each 7. So I'll give you an example, chesed, which is kindness, and translated as love. Gevura, severity, restriction, judgment, strictness. Tiferet, which is mercy and compassion. Now, 3 different emotions, 3 different characters. Each one, though, is integrated with the other. So, for example, kindness sometimes will express itself as being harsh with someone. It's out of love. When you discipline your child, it's because you love them. I don't discipline my neighbor's child. And a kid comes home and says, "Hey, you love me? Why are you getting me in trouble? You don't even care for that kid, you're not getting him in trouble." No, precisely because I love you. I care for you. I'm going to discipline you. So disciplining a child is kindness, but it's expressed through severity, through strictness. That's the integration. So 7 times 7 is 49. So the 49 days of the Omer are 7 weeks, each week divided into 7. So we attack the entire gamut of our emotional makeup, our soul. And what this does is say, I'm an imperfect person. Okay, I want to become better. Where do I begin? There's so much. I have so many issues. The problem is so large that I'm overwhelmed by it. But if I can step away from it and say, well, let's look at every single part of myself, break it up. In chesed sheba chesed, in the loving kindness, in the extreme epitome of kindness, where am I going wrong? Where's there room for improvement? What have I done this past year that I've messed up in this capacity? And where can I work on myself? What exercise can I do to make that better? That's today's mission. After today, I don't think about that anymore. I dealt with that, hopefully. I can move on to the next. Gevura sheba chesed, in the strictness within kindness, in the severity, the judgment of kindness. What does that mean? How can I identify that in my life? And where can I improve on it? And what that does is we break up our entire self, our personality, our character, into, in this case, 49 specific ideas, and one at a time deal with them. So after you've escaped the Egypt, you have to then break down that issue and deal with it step by step. You deal with the beast. You get in a room with your animal, you look it in the eye, and you have the confidence to say, I can do this. But you have to break it down. You have to really deal with it.
What if the beast bites you back?
You got to escape then. Then you're still in the first stage.
Right.
The first step is to escape. If the beast has any control over you, right now it's not a time to deal with it. It's escape time. Run away. Shut it out. Once you've gone beyond it, once you know it's not a threat, you can look at it from the outside and say, well, now I got to deal with it. Because if I don't deal with it, then I'm not living as myself. Myself is still the beast. Who I am, my regular self, has these demons. I've managed to escape them, but that's not real. It's not me. But you're right. Sometimes you're in the middle of the process, you run away again.
I used to make a habit of thanking the beasts before my prayer and meditation, before I go to bed, repose at night. And I would tell Michelle, I thank the beast, whatever my beast is, or whatever the most ostensible manifestation of the beast is at that point in my life. It's always been different stages of life. And I always make a point of thanking the beast, because that's where I get my muscle from. And so far it has worked, you know, but I understand getting out of the clutches of the beast too.
Yeah.
You know, you need a little room, you know, every once in a while. But I've also found thanking, you know, like the Rebbe said, better an ox than a mouse.
You have to know what talks to your animal.
So whatever beast, and to the certain extent that you live in essence, the bigger the beast, the more light.
You know, we all know ourselves better than anyone else knows us, hopefully. So, the beast, the animal, the demons that I'm struggling with, and the demons you're struggling with are very different. And we have to know ourselves well enough to know how to talk to our own, talk to ourselves. What's going to work, the exercise that worked for me to work through my issues may not work for you. Maybe a totally different language. So there are some shared languages, obviously, some shared tips and tools. But ultimately, what's going on inside of me, I have to deal with. No one else can. People can guide me, help me, but we got to talk to ourselves. In Kabbalah, there's a terminology, and Pete, you love this one, Ratzov V'Shov, and it comes from the verse.
My favorite.
The verse that speaks about Ezekiel has his vision of the divine chariot. He says he sees the angels, literally the animals, are Ratzov V'Shov, means they're running and returning, back and forth. And Kabbalah takes this, borrows the idea, and says life is lived out in this tension between running back and forth. Or another expression, ratzu means running, also means a yearning. Right? It's tension. It's you want something you don't have. You're trying to get places. You're escaping. And shov means you're coming back. You're returning. There's some resolution to the tension. There's calmness. You've reached somewhere. But there's a constant back and forth. Right? Our very heartbeat is God created in this image, where there's expansion and contraction. Right? That's how our heart beats. Life is lived out. Life is created, really, through this back and forth. Ratzon and Shov. And that's this process. There's this yearning. I want to leave this place. I want something I don't have. I don't feel comfortable with who I am. It's a tension I'm struggling with. And then I want to reach this certain calmness, resolve the tension. But it's a constant struggle, because once you've reached that place of calmness, you have different tensions, right? The better you become, the smaller nuanced faults you notice in yourself. So life is a constant course of getting better. And so that's the two poles. Leaving Egypt is the tension, is feeling that tension and escaping it. And we're aiming to reach the shov, we're aiming to reach a place of calmness, a place of resolution, where we can live within ourselves in a happy, healthy, balanced way. The way to go from A to B, from the place of tension to the place of resolution, is to resolve the issues. Deal with them. Fascinating idea. The Omer is one of the only sacrifices in the temple, only offerings in the temple, that came from barley. Mostly they were wheat. The grain offerings. Barley in biblical parlance is an animal food. And the Talmud as well looks at barley as being animal fodder. Why was this sacrifice specifically brought from barley? And Hasidic thought, it highlights it, says, you know why? This time of the Omer is when we deal with the animal. Passover, we're escaping, we're just dealing with God. We're leaving our issues behind and embracing goodness, embracing God, embracing the light. Shavuot, we've hopefully reached a place of light. So both those places, Pesach has matzah, comes from wheat. Shavuot had an offering made from wheat. But the process in between came from animal food, because it's a time we're dealing with our animal. So symbolically, it was brought from barley. And so that's the process of Sefirat HaOmer, counting the Omer, of working within ourselves, of dealing with our issues, confronting the issues, in order that at the other side of this process, the end of the 49 days, we'll be able to receive the Torah. God came down to the mountain. That symbolism is very important. Egypt, the Jews had to escape the world, escape reality, to get to God. They ran away, they jumped out of mundane, material living in order to encounter God. Shavuot, God came down onto the mountain. Now there was a spiritual, divine experience on earth, within our material lives, within our regular daily living. And that's the goal of Torah. The whole of Judaism is to bring spirituality, bring divine awareness, bring God into the world. Into the world isn't just a physical space. Into the world is conceptual space. Into our workplace, into our relationships, into our struggles, into the way we eat, sleep, breathe. We're bringing God into the human experience, into earthly reality. We can't do that if we're not ready for it. We can't do that if we are non-godly people, right? If our lives don't reflect God, then we can't express God in our lives. We can escape it, we can put on a show for a little bit, but that's not who we are. And what we're really saying then is, the real me, God isn't there. So I am not bringing God into that part of myself, into my real self. So we have to become wholesome people. We have to become people that reflect wholesomeness of God. Our souls are in sync with God's soul, so to speak. Our lives reflect the divinity, reflect the divine. And that's only through becoming better people. There's no easy fix. There's an easy fix to a lot of things, especially in today's day and age. We want instant results. Next day shipping, right? But essentially, for real change, it doesn't come overnight.
That's why we're in the desert. That's why after you leave Mitzrayim.
You're barren. You're tired.
There was someone.
You don't get to Israel right away.
Right. There was some. You might know who said this. I don't recall the name, but he said, after leaving Egypt, Mitzrayim, some people like, hey, we're in the desert. I want to go back, but you can't go back. And he said the 600,000 could quite literally be reflect 600,000 combinations of intellectual concepts, emotional complexes, and physical instincts that we have to mull through in the desert before we get to the Holy Land. Like we're indoctrinated, we inherit some chromosomally through inheritance, and a lot is by acculturation. But like the combination, like you were saying, there are many combinations with the 49. And he said literally 600,000 intellectual concepts, emotional complexes, and physical instincts that we have to mull through, eschew some of them, or rectify, like you're saying.
Why that number?
That's the amount of Jews they were in the desert.
Yeah, 600,000 Israelites in the desert.
Yeah.
And before entering the Holy Land, it's a lot. It's a long process.
Right.
It's not going to be.
It's a lifelong process. Like I said, once you've reached it, once you've done it.
Yeah. It's a lot of Omers to count for many years for 600,000, right?
So I want to finish with a beautiful idea, something that's fascinating. I can't get into the whole issue, but there's a massive controversy. There was in the Talmudic times about when the Omer is. The verse says, "From the morrow of Shabbos, begin counting the Omer." The day after Shabbos. The sages in the Talmud understood this to mean not Shabbos literally, the seventh day of the week, rather in the context of that passage in this week's portion, speaking about Passover, so the morrow of the holiday of Passover. And there are times where holidays are called Shabbos, days of rest. And so it means the day after the first day of Passover, i.e. the second day of Passover. That was the understanding of the sages, and the Talmud, there's about 2 or 3 full pages of proofs the sages had to solidify this opinion, this approach. This was the tradition, and this was, even though it's not a literal reading of the text. There was a group called the Bayis Susim. It was a breakaway group of non-traditionalists.
What's that called again?
Bayis Susim, the Bathusian, I don't know the English. It was similar to the Sadducees. It was the same, tradition. They don't believe in the rabbinic tradition of Torah. They read Torah more often than not more literally. Torah says the morrow of Sabbath, that means on a Sunday. And the Omer count always starts on a Sunday, they said. This year, Passover on a Shabbos, actually, which means we started the Omer count on a Sunday. It worked out according to both opinions. But they said every year, no matter when Passover is, Omer begins on a Sunday. And this has huge implications of when Shavuot is celebrated. Different day of the week. A massive discussion. And they have this, textual proofs for both sides. But I want to highlight one idea. Why? Why was it such a big debate? And why were the sages so adamant interpreting it as being Pesach, and the Bayatusim so adamant interpreting it as being Shabbos? And one idea is like this, very briefly. There's a massive difference between Shabbos and holidays. Shabbos, the seventh day of the week, is holy by virtue of being the seventh day. Nothing we do changes Shabbos. It's built into creation. Every seventh day is going to be a holy day. They translate the word Shabbat. They translate it in this verse as being Sabbath, Shabbos. So the morrow, the next day after Sabbath is Sunday. But essentially, the beginning of the count is traced from Shabbos. Shabbos is holy in its own. It comes from God. God created the world in the 6 days, rest on the seventh. He built it, hardwired into creation, that there's going to be a day of rest every 7 days. We are just accepting this norm. We're just on the receiving end. God is the one giving. In a sense, we escape ourselves every seventh day. Right? Our lives, there's no Shabbos in our lives necessarily. We have to escape ourselves and accept God's day of rest. The holidays, the Chagim, are a different beast because they are set by the calendar, and the calendar is actually set by the courts. Human beings looked at the moon. Now we have a set calendar, but back in the day, every month they had this sightings of when the new moon is. They went to the Beis Din, the court. They said, we saw the re-emergence of the moon. The courts would interrogate them a little and say, okay, it's a new month. And they had the power to change the dates. They can add an extra day to a month, take away a day. Whenever the court decides it's a new month, the court makes a new month. And the holidays were set by this calendar. And this is an entire discussion for itself. It's the reason we keep 2 days of each holiday outside of Israel. Because people who lived here far away wouldn't know until weeks later which day was called the new month. And so if I don't know when the new month is, I don't know when the 15th day of the month is. I need to keep 2 days of Passover just in case. This might be the 15th, or tomorrow might be the 15th. That's where it all started from. So what the holidays express is human involvement in spiritual achievement. We had to create this day to be holy. The courts, the representatives of the people, they're the ones that created the holiness of the day. Had they declared the day before the Rosh Chodesh, the day before would have been holy as a chag, as a holiday. The courts created the sanctity of those days by virtue of declaring the new months. So humanity has a part to play within our own thinking, our own judgment. We are partners in God in creating holiness. That's what the holidays reflect. Shabbos reflects holiness that God just imposed in the world, and we are sort of just followers, which means we escape. We don't have to, it's not our own decisions. We put ourselves aside, we follow God. Holiday is our involvement. We bring ourselves to the table in achieving this holiness. And this goes into a large debate between the Bayatusim and the Sadducees. They felt that we have to just follow God, literal reading of the text, no rabbinic additions. Whereas the Pharisees, the sages, they felt that the process of human thinking, of the rabbinic interpretation, was divine as well. And that's why they had this debate. But essentially, what they're saying is the Omer was all about human involvement. It's all about working within ourselves, working on ourselves. So to have the starting point being a Shabbos is a wrong starting point for the Omer process. Shabbos is a day imposed by God. There's no human involvement. And a process that starts, is kicked off by Shabbos, is a process of escapism, a process where I'm putting myself aside and accepting God, transcending myself. The rabbis felt the process of the Omer must begin with a holiday, a chag, a holiday that highlights human involvement in the spiritual process, human contribution within our own judgment, our own reasoning is part of the spiritual process. That's the kickoff for the whole sphere to Omer, the whole counting of the Omer, where we're trying to integrate our own lives into this spiritual awakening, into this spiritual realization. So that's the process we're in now. We're over 3 weeks in, almost halfway. Right? 3.5 weeks will be halfway. Tonight's the halfway. Funny to say. Tonight's the halfway point of the Omer. Right? We're literally 3.5 weeks into the Omer. We're halfway there. So whatever we haven't done until now, we can at least, the second half, catch up. We have time. But really it's a lifelong process. It's a year-long process and a lifelong process of integrating our truths that we believe in, our inspired moments, integrating them into our living, into our struggles. But it's important that we can't jump the gun. If we're not ready for it, we've got to escape first. So there's no excuse in saying, well, this is who I am, I can't do good. No. This is who you are. Right now you need to run away from that. Push it away, escape it to do good. So essentially there's no excuse ever not to do good. But there's doing good and there's being a good person, being good. Doing good is a lot easier. We can always do good. Either by escaping or actually being good. But after we do good, we have to go back and become good. Be good. And that's a much harder process of working within ourselves, talking to ourselves, mentoring ourselves, confronting, battling, struggling. That's a real process. But we can only do that process from a healthy place. So only after the Jews escaped from Egypt, they begin this process of the Omer. But at the end of the process of the Omer, they arrived at Sinai. They had this revelation from God. Which means they now got the mitzvahs that God said, within your lifestyle, in the framework of societal living, they're going to go to Israel, in the framework of community, there's going to be a divine living, divine framework. And that means you're integrating a transcendent living into regular day-to-day life. And that's what they received at the end of the Omer process. Once they had become better people, once they were now spiritually adept, then they can harness whatever the spiritual ideas and integrate them into their living. Until that point, they weren't ready for it. They couldn't get the Torah right after they left Egypt. They go right over their heads. They could have had the same revelation experience, but they never got it integrated into who they are. It wouldn't work as becoming a real lifestyle of mitzvahs, of Torah. It wouldn't work. Only once they grappled and battled and struggled with their demons and overcame them and became refined, more aware people, then they can get a Torah. Then they can have an integrated living. And those 3 steps are 3 steps of our life. Every day we have those 3 steps, right? Wake up in the morning with issues, with whatever we're dealing with. First thing, we escape. First thing in the morning, run away. Have a few moments of silence. Have a few moments of prayer, of escaping from everything. But then, deal with it. Then, struggle with it. And hopefully when you go to sleep at night, take a few moments to reflect. What did I overcome today? What am I a better person? What do I achieve today? So every day we go through this process. So, l'chaim. We should be able to go through the process peacefully.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's the real fight.